welcome to the show. I'm your host, Charity Majors, and in today's episode, I am going to be sharing how I had the opportunity to share the stage with Dean Graciosi and be brought on to Chris and Lori's team for their dinner series to be able to speak and even just share the stage with them to a room full of amazing leaders and connectors who have millions of followers and millions of dollars in their business and millions of downloads on their podcasts, like this room full of really big people, and how I was not afraid. Well, mostly not afraid or mostly not scared to do it. And this gets into the concept of living from a calling and not a circumstance. Okay. So as I was preparing to speak at one of Chris and Lori's incredible events, it's called the Dinner Series. They brought me on to be able to facilitate connection because the intention of this event is to really create connection and have a really high level network of people that you nurture for the long haul for years and years to come. And Chris and Lori, they're always really great at curating incredible rooms. I've been in their masterminds before and have followed them, and we were in network marketing for 10 plus years ago and connected at other leadership events. So I've been in their orbit. We've been in each other's orbit for a really long time. And what was so fun about this specific event was I wasn't necessarily doing anything that I hadn't been doing for the last few years. Okay, and I'm going to share this, and I don't say this like to brag, but I say this actually so humbly and so grateful for the reps that I put in for the prior years that allowed the confidence for Chris and Lori to be able to say yes to have me come speak at this event. And you'll hear me share about this experience over the next handful of episodes. I was talking with another speaker, and it was funny. He was the speaking coach for Amy Porterfield and a couple Olympic athletes. And he was joking. He's like, I'm going to ride these coattails for a really long time until the cows come home. And I don't even have cows, so it's going to be for a long time. So thanks, Amy Porterfield, for letting me ride your coattails. And I love that approach because there are those times where it's an opportunity that shifts a lot of things. And this was one of those. And I really want to pull back the curtain because was it an incredible opportunity? Absolutely. Am I so grateful? Absolutely. Do I love like working alongside Chris and Lori? Absolutely. Like they are the real deal. And it wasn't anything that I wasn't doing before, and I didn't need them to give me permission to be on that stage to do what I was already doing, if this makes sense. So I'll give you an example. I remember back in the day, I was in pageants, and I used to not ever even be a pageant girl, and had some friends kind of jump in with me with the opportunity. And I said, instead of saying why me, I said why not me. And so I jumped in and ended up in a 3-year career in the pageant industry, making top 6 in the world. So I actually got really good at owning the stage, being confident even in my swimsuit on stage, and being able to succinctly talk with the judges within a few minutes, getting across my message and making an impact to be able to stand out in a room full of 60 other incredible, beautiful, talented, driven, leading women in all of the world. And I made top 6. Okay. And so I remember in my pageant career, I first started out as what's called a local title holder. And for me, this was like, okay, I kind of needed like a vehicle or a little bit of an outlet to be able to contribute more to my community, to be surrounded by other women. I had my gym. I had a wellness facility, a brick and mortar, and so I had invited them in and sponsored them, which was how I kind of got connected into the pageant world. And they just kept saying, you should do it. Like, you're so involved in the community, you would be great. So I finally, again, I dove in. I said, why not me? And so I became Mrs. Boise. And I remember as I was continuing to serve the community, as I was continuing to like host workshops or connect with the women and invite them in and host fun gatherings, and we collected thousands of shoes for orphans and sent them over to Africa. I remember when I won Mrs. Idaho, so I won my state title. It wasn't like the title of Mrs. Idaho gave me permission to do any of that stuff. I was already doing it. What that title did was actually amplified what I was already doing. And so then when I went on to then become Mrs. of the Americas and make top 6 in the world, so I had a national title and then obviously like top 6 in the world. What was this beautiful, like, full circle moment was when I went over to South Africa to compete against almost 60 other women who had national titles. So think Mrs. South Africa and Mrs. Germany and, all like Mrs. Canada and all of these incredible women who are leading their entire countries. And here I am, like standing shoulder to shoulder alongside other giants and not feeling insecure and really celebrating not only who I was, but who they were. Because when you're big on the inside, like you can like stand there without feeling insecure when you're alongside giants. And I remember standing there, and this full circle moment was I actually got to after we competed and I made top 6 in the world. The next day, a few of the girls that I connected with, so Mrs. South Africa, her name is Nicole Capper. She's amazing. Go follow her if you don't. And a former Mrs. World, Candace Abrams, and another gal, we had gone to an orphanage, and I had actually brought over 100 pairs of shoes, and they're called like the shoe that grows. So there's these really beautiful shoes that are really practical shoes with a beautiful mission where they kind of buckle and they can expand and grow, because they're actually in orphanages and in these underserved areas in Africa. These kids can't play sports and sometimes can't even go to school if they don't have shoes, and so they end up wearing like their parents' shoes. So imagine a 6-year-old kid wearing grown-up shoes, or the shoes that they had as a 10-year-old were the shoes that they had as a 6-year-old, and so they would have to cut the front of the shoes out. And so I had partnered with a nonprofit organization, and we almost actually got stuck in customs. We brought over huge duffel bags full of over 100 of these shoes that grow with really cool buckles that expanded the shoes so that these kids could wear them for a long time and go to school and get an education and play sports. And so we had connected with some orphanages, and this full circle moment came when where I'd started as Mrs. Boise, where we had collected shoes from our community and filled up a huge semi-truck and sent them overseas to Africa, I was now one of the girls that was like handing the shoes to these underserved orphans. And my heart was just like, oh, like this was amazing. Like what an amazing, amazing opportunity. So I wasn't just like practicing, like I wasn't doing anything in this bigger title, in this national title and making top 6 in the world, anything that I hadn't done before I was Mrs. Boise, or even before I was without a title, like as a just business owner and active person in the community. Like my gym, we'd actually, part of our monthly profits went to, we adopted an orphan through one of the nonprofit organizations that you can support a child every single month. And so it was like our gym kid was up on the wall, and we supported him every single month, and all of our members knew, and they knew that some of their profits are going towards supporting that kid. So this was even before I had all these really fun, fancy titles. And so I went from like sending money to sending shoes to now bringing shoes with me to this orphanage and handing them to the children and seeing them put them on and seeing them run outside and start to play soccer and then get enrolled in school. And it was this incredible opportunity, but it wasn't anything that I wasn't doing before I had the title, right? It was multiple years of putting in the reps and multiple years of serving and multiple years of support. And this kind of runs parallel to where would now back to this opportunity where I had to, with Chris and Lori, and to share the stage with Dean Graciosi and to serve these incredible entrepreneurs and to create deep and rich connection with them. It's because I wasn't doing anything that I hadn't been doing before. I've spent multiple years creating connection and multiple years speaking and multiple years on stages and working out the kinks and failing forward and learning how to work the room and move the room and how to facilitate the room and how to give directions and how to be able to create deep and meaningful connection. And so what really gave Chris and Lori the confidence to say yes to when I pitched them to be able to come and speak was because there was proof and because I had put in the reps. It's almost like, and if you listen to maybe, I don't know, a handful of episodes prior to this, where when I became a volleyball player and I put in the reps for years and years as a middle school player and then as a high school player, it gave the confidence for the collegiate coach to say, yes, and here's your scholarship, here's your money, come play on my team. So it was almost like that same concept. And what I see a lot in just kind of the online space is that there's a lot of people that are out there who they're like, I want to be a speaker and you can just hire me. And it's like, well, but you haven't put in the reps and you haven't developed your message yet. And so my encouragement for you is to put in the reps. And my encouragement for you is that you don't need the recognition or to be seen or the permission from these other big leaders to be able to do what's on your heart, to be able to do what you're called to do. If you're called to be a voice, then you're going to be a voice, like whether that is on your own podcast, whether that is creating your own stages. Like you don't need any of our permission. You don't need any of our invitations. You don't need any of our like, ooh, I see you, I'm going to pick you. What will actually get the attention is if you put your, like of these big leaders, is if you put your head down and you put in the reps and all of a sudden you're on stages and all of a sudden they're like, oh, like give them something to like turn their head and to turn their gaze for in order to say, yeah, I see you. And it comes with, I don't want to say this to like discourage you, but there's a stat that if you were to practice, like it can happen as for as short or as long of a time as you take it, right? Like if you know that you're called to be a voice, like you're going to do it for years and years and years and probably the rest of your life. It's going to show up in different facets, whether that's a podcast or on stage or you're teaching or, you know, it's on your YouTube channel or your whatever that might look like. If you're called to be a voice and you're living from that calling, it's going to show up in multiple facets. But if you're living from a circumstance, that means that you're still sitting in the audience with your internal hand raised, waiting for someone else to pick you, and you really feel unseen, and you're not willing to put in the work. Like you're living from this circumstance of, oh, nobody sees me, and oh, I know I'm meant to do that. Like there has to be eventually a shift that happens where you live from your calling as a, like that you're called to be a voice, and you step into that and you do it messy and you do it afraid and you start to practice and you start to work out the kinks. With comedians, for an example, they don't get like a spot on Comedy Central just starting out. There's this where when I actually equip my chapter directors to be speakers and facilitators with Business and Bubbly, that like we help create that space for them, but we also talk about this concept of putting in the reps. And when you think about this, like these comedians that show up on Comedy Central and they make the whole room laugh with all of their 10 jokes, they didn't start out with 10 funny jokes. Like they started out with like 10 sucky jokes and 10 crappy jokes, and they would go practice, you know, in whatever sleazy, dirty, you know, speak easy type of a thing, and all of a sudden they come in with their 10 jokes and maybe they have one funny joke and they're reading the room and they're like, ooh, okay, I got one. So I'm going to take this one good joke and I am going to throw out the other 9 and I'm going to rework my whole set. And then I'm going to go to the next whatever opportunity, the next speakeasy, the next comedy club. And there are probably 5 or 6 people in the room, but they still show up. And now they got their 2 funny jokes and they throw out their other 8 that suck. And now all of a sudden they rework their whole script. And they do this time and time and time and time again, so that now all of a sudden they have 10 funny jokes that make the entire room laugh. And that is how they grow, and that is how they get the spots on Comedy Central. That is how they get the hour slots on, you know, mainstream TV. It's because they've put in the reps. And there's this stat that shows, and this is what I was saying, you can do this the short way or the long way. But if you were to actually practice for 18 minutes a day or 100 hours, you would actually become better than 90% of the people in the world at that one skill, because most people are going to give up. Most people do it crappy, or they're actually not doing the reps for a short length of time, or they're taking 10 years to do the reps instead of taking like 1 year to do the reps. And they're not practicing, or they're even practicing wrong. Like, I remember this concept of practicing wrong or doing the reps wrong. And if you do the reps wrong, it doesn't matter how many times you do the reps, you're not going to get the results. So when I was a personal trainer, if someone was doing like a really funky squat and they're like, oh, I'm just doing these squats, and they're, or like a really awful push-up, and they're like, yeah, my back hurts, right? If you could just think in your mind like this swayed back trying to do this push-up, but they're doing it wrong. They're like, I'm doing the reps and I'm doing the reps and I'm doing the reps and I'm not getting any results. It's like, well, if you're doing the reps wrong, it actually isn't going to matter how many reps you do. You're actually just continuing to like repeat and like a really bad cycle and a really bad rep. So you're not going to get results. So the only way that these people then, when they would come to me as a personal trainer to get the reps right, was I would give them feedback, and I would correct their, like their posture. I would correct their sway back, and I would get them to actually use the right muscles. And it was hard and it was messy. And all of a sudden, like, they would get 5 right reps, and then they would get 10 right reps, and then they would get 20 right reps. And all of a sudden they're seeing results and they're getting stronger and their body's changing. It's because they're actually doing the reps in the right way. So this is the same thing as well. Like, if you're putting in the reps and you want to be a speaker, like, you could still be doing the wrong reps. You could still be really bad at storytelling. You could still be really bad at like saying or saying like, or saying all of these filler words. You could still be really bad at, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I'm just giving you this analogy of, if you want to be a speaker, like, I want to encourage you to do the reps right. And this doesn't come without getting feedback. This doesn't come without getting around other people that can give you feedback. This doesn't come without getting around people that say, ooh, okay, here's what your body language is saying right now, but you're saying this out of your mouth and it doesn't match. And that's a big deal as well. And so if you want to actually put in the reps, and if you want to learn how to be on big stages, and that your internal world, that you can stand alongside giants and not feel insecure, and you want to get across your message in a really impactful way, like, not just talk at people, but you want to get your message across, and you want to impact people. You want to transform them, that when they walk in the room one way, they leave the room another way, not having just been talked at. You want to actually make a transformational impact. Then I want you to text me the word speaker to 833-231-8098. I can't tell you what I'm launching yet, but you are going to want to be a part. And this is where it comes into living from the call as a speaker, and to be a voice and not from a circumstance. Are you living from the call that you know that you're meant to be the voice, or are you living from a circumstance that maybe someone hasn't given you permission, or you are still sitting there with your internal hand raised, or no one is seeing you, no one is coming to your things, or maybe you just still have 5 people in the room, or you're feeling discouraged. And this is what it looks like to live from a circumstance, that your external circumstances are actually dictating what you are doing, compared to when you live from a call. When I was speaking on stage, and when I was preparing to speak at the dinner series with Chris and Lori, was I getting butterflies? Of course. But when I leaned into, and that was from the circumstance, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be sharing a stage with these people, and I'm going to be speaking to these people, and I could go there, because we always get the choice. And that was living from a circumstance. Or I can live from the call of saying, actually, I'm meant to be a voice, and I am a voice. And I'm not doing anything that I haven't been doing for the last few years, just in a different room. And so it's actually is how I be and who I be on that stage. And I was able to go on confidently, really grounded, in a great way that that facilitated incredible connection. I had probably 30 people come up to me and say that was one of the best facilitations and speaking that they have ever seen. And that was then the external feedback or the circumstance where I'm like, okay, I'm living from that space as a call and receiving this positive external validation in this external circumstance. So if you know that you're called to be a voice and you want to not live from circumstance, that you want to live from a call, then text me the word speaker to 833-231-8098 and stay tuned for an announcement coming soon. All right, my friend, have an amazing day today and cheers to your success. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I hope it brought some value and some fun into your business and life. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, and even share the episode with a fellow business bestie who you know will love it. It helps us continue to attract top-level guests and reach more and more women who are on their journey in business just like you. Remember that when money gets in the hands of good women, great things happen. Cheers to your success.